to this series of monthly webinars that have been organized by Future Practice, Sports Legal, and African Sports Network. So today we're going to have a very engaging session. We have our speaker who's already here. His name is Richard Bikko, and he's a program lead for Innovate Kenya. So once again, thank you so much. So how we are going to run this, we'll have a series of questions for Richard. And then, so you have a series of questions for Richard, which will be followed by a question and answer session. So feel free to shoot all the questions that you might have around sports, building skills, education, and all that. So once again, thank you very, very much. And I know that this is going to be a very amazing session and an engaging one. So thank you so much. Richard Bikko, you're very welcome. Please take the floor. You can start by introducing yourself to us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that introduction, Wakesho. My name is Richard Bikko. I mostly go by Richie or Bikko. Richard is my formal name. Thank you all for tuning in, for signing up for this session. And thank you to Sports Legal, African Sports Network, and Future Practice for organizing this webinar and other webinars where great learning and sharing is taking place. So for today, I'd like to share about how sports can provide a great platform that can enhance learning, both in academics and also contribute towards building a strong character centered on values. And I hope by the end of this, we can reimagine how education and sports can complement each other, both for Kenya and Africa, and how we can view sports as a vital learning opportunity for growth and treat it as an integral part of education and schooling. So as mentioned, it wasn't on the introduction, but I'm a former retired student track athlete. I ran from primary, secondary, all up until university. And I also got an opportunity to run and study in the US. So a bit of what I'll share today will be a bit different because I understand like the education and the sports industry are different, but I still feel like there are some great insights that I can share with you all. And as Wakesho mentioned, I really look forward for the Q&A session at the end of this to see like how we can explore how we can grow like the sports industry and education together.
Thanks, Richard. So probably just to start off the conversation, how has COVID been for you? Are you under lockdown? How is everything? What are you doing to keep yourself busy? Are you able to sport? Are you able to track? Are you able to play football? So please tell us how you're managing during this time, because most of us are watching you from home. We've been home for the last, 3 or so months. So yes, it would be interesting to hear your views on that.
During this time, I'm stuck at home, we're working remotely for the organization I work for, and it's been a ride, up and down, a roller coaster that's amplified. So it's been hard. My sleeping pattern has been off almost 3 out of 4 times out of the week. So trying to get a rhythm to like really rest and sleep has been hard, as I find my mind racing a lot. I feel like I'm on social media, so I try to like minimize that because there's so much information that's being thrown out, especially in the digital space and social media. So it hasn't been easy, but I'm starting to get a rhythm of how to balance work and also like balance like my mental health and emotional health during this time. And as far as exercising or just trying to keep fit, I used to play football a lot, but this time, there's no one meeting to play football, so I've had to be creative about how like I work out from home. So what I started doing was I started with a simple like doing 10 push-ups each day just to keep fit. And now I've been able to increase to 20 push-ups a day. So that's one thing. I've been able to run on a few days, though not consistent. But those are a few things that have been able to keep me sane and also exercising during this time as well.
Thanks, Richard. And so just to start off the conversation again, what is your background into sport? How did you start sport? Is it a God-given talent? When did you realize you could run, you could kick ball? And so please, if you can trace that journey up to where you are now and up to the point that you retired.
Oh, okay. It's a good question. So maybe from my early childhood, I could say that I discovered I was good at sports during around like class 2, and I enjoyed playing and taking part in all types of sports. I really struggled with academics, both in primary and secondary school. Masomo ilikuwa ngumu, and for the non-Swahili speakers, learning was hard for me. But I think it was more about how the environment of school and education was set up at that point that made learning really difficult for me. So I found a safe space in sports, and sports made me feel like an artist, and it was my blank canvas. And what really helped is that I could run fast, or faster than my peers. So this helped in like a lot of sports that involved running. So from football, basketball. I really didn't get into track and field until I think around like class 5. So in my early childhood, like it was just about like really having fun, playing sports with my friends, my peers, and I really wish that playful nature can also be taken up to adulthood or adopted into adulthood, and not just having an assumption of like play and sports is for athletes or young people, because I think there's a whole value in participating in sports and play, but that's a conversation for later. So competitively, I think in class 5 is when I did like races and competed against other schools. And still it was, at that point it was, it was just like a one-off thing. It wasn't like really structured. So after I finished primary school and transitioned to high school, the high school I went to, my first high school that I attended, didn't prioritize sports as much as I'd hoped to. So we didn't have like coaches or the required equipment and resources to fully engage in sports, but we made do with what we had. And what we had was a sports field and a goalpost for football. But I saw like my peers and my students like stepping up to coach, manage, and lead practice sessions, organize for sport days for various games. So yeah, we made do with what we had at that point. And then towards my second year in high school, there was a big shift for me and my family where we moved to another country. This big shift was in terms of like culture and just adapting to a lot of things. But I joined like the high school track and field team, and this really helped with like my self-esteem and confidence, as I felt like I was part of a community. And then in college, sports offered me an opportunity to learn about discipline and accountability and how to take care of myself, as it was something I hadn't thought of that much until I started getting injuries, because I wasn't so conscious about like my diet or taking care of my body through getting a good night's rest of sleep, and also the type of shoes like I wear for running. I wasn't aware that for my type of feet, I have an high arc, so I need like some type of shoes that can accommodate that. So yeah, I was learning new stuff. So being a college athlete offered me a great perspective and appreciation for athletes, and the amount of dedication, commitment that it takes to compete at such a level and even beyond.
Thanks, Richard. And for those who have just joined us or are joining us, we're having a conversation with Richard Bikko, who is the lead Innovate Kenya, and he's here to share with us his experiences in sports, and specifically his experience in sports, education, and life skills. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. Richard Bikko is a retired or former athlete, as he has chosen to refer to himself as, and so he has a lot of insight into sports and how we can take advantage of sports to, enhance our education and also to learn a lot of life skills. So again, if you have just joined us, you have just slightly missed his introduction and his journey into how he became an athlete. But don't worry, as we go along, he's going to discuss more and share with us more. So Richard had just talked about the opportunities of learning that he got in sports. So probably the next thing that I would like you to talk to us about is, again, just from your learning experiences, what are some of the other skills that sports helped you to uncover?
Okay. So yeah, when I think about sports, especially like track and field, there's that competitive aspect. Like I can't deny that's really evident in sports. But like to take it back, really say like sports really encouraged me to learn about healthy competition, and healthy competition is a way to improve each other rather than just seeking domination or um, seeking domination to win over your opponents. So, for example, when I ran in high school, um, the team that I was part of, I really got to bond with them, and they became my friends. And as we competed against like other schools, I also became friends with my competitors or rivals from the other schools that we raced against, and we used to cheer for each other. And this was like a great sportsmanship. I don't like using that word because it's doesn't include women in it. But this, this like bond that we created like with our rivals, like really showed that competition doesn't have to be about like animosity. Like we can be rivals to like really improve each other. And also the unique thing that happened, like when I transitioned out of high school to university, um, my friends and teammates from high school, they joined other universities, which was in the same conference as my university. So they became my new rivals. And in my university, two of my former rivals from high school joined the university I went to. So they became my new teammates and friends. And so I started competing against my old teammates and high school friends, but it never like interfered like with our friendship and bond. Like we still kept like cheering for each other. And so one great thing is that sports provided me like with this interwoven bond of like rivalry mixing with friendship that I still cherish up until today.
Thanks, Richard. And also, just to write on to what you have said, I'm very also curious to understand what really inspired you to get into sports.
Um, what inspired me to get into sports? Well, that's
Yeah.
that's a really good question. I think part of it, as I mentioned, like about like my early childhood, it sports like really gave me like an opportunity, a safe space, actually a safe space to like be who I want to be. And as I just mentioned, like sports over the years has shaped like how I bond with my friends, and so and from early years, like yeah, it provided like a safe space, and then it evolved over time, and I've been able to learn and acquire lots of life skills through participating in sports. And when I was in the moment, actually, I didn't realize this. Like, I just used to play sports because, yeah, I loved it. I enjoyed it. It was a time, it was a way to spend my time more productively. But like now that I look back on it, it really offered a lot in terms of like learning about leadership and collaboration, like those life skills that don't come easy, like when you're just focused on like academics. So yeah, a lot of inspiration came from like sports was like my safe space, and I felt like a sense of community from it.
So far you have told us, very positive things about your engagement in sports, about learning about leadership, around collaboration, and that your rivals are not necessarily your rivals. So I'm also curious to know, what are the challenges? Are there any challenges that you faced, and what were those challenges?
Mm, I think maybe I can share challenges. Maybe we could talk about like the rivalry aspect of it. I know I shared like the positive story of like yeah, I got to bond with my friends, um, and that happened in the track and field cross country. But when I'm a big football fan as well, and so when I watch football, I really get into it. and I can see like how I take rivalry as animosity. And I can give an example of like Messi and Ronaldo. When I started like really cheering for their teams like Real Madrid and Barcelona. So I'm a big Messi fan. I'm Team Messi, and for the longest time I saw Ronaldo and his team like as enemies, and this was like dangerous thinking because even though I mean it's people I don't really know personally, but seeing like how I was so heavily invested in it, like it made me view Ronaldo and their teammates as an enemy, and this is a dangerous thinking in terms of it doesn't really capture like what's the driving force behind the amazing achievements like both Messi and Ronaldo have been able to accomplish. And at this point, actually, I'll come back to the point about like my personal challenges with it, but I'd like to actually just share a small video.
Leo. Cristiano, you are still the top scorer in the history of this competition. That has not gone away. You've had a great year for club and country, winning the Scudetto in your first season in Italy, the Nations League with Portugal as well. You love a challenge. How has this first year in Italy been for you?
Amazing. It was a special year because I moved from, I was 9 years in Real Madrid, and to move to Italian league was a big move, but it was good. The year was amazing. I won 3 titles, the Super Cup, Serie A, and Nationals Cup against Holland, which is fantastic.
Nice to see Virgil
yes,
again.
I have to say Holland. And it was good. Individual, I did very well, and collective as well. So amazing year, and I'm so glad. Another year, another records, so perfect.
Now, we haven't had you both together for a while, so while you're both here, we noticed you've been talking a lot. Do you miss him? ¿Te extraña o no? Es la pregunta.
¿Para él o para mí?
No, tú a él.
Ah, ¿quieres los dos?
Sí.
Ok, el que conteste primero.
Sí, yo ya lo
¿Sí?
dije en su momento, era lindo
Llores
tenerlo.
mucho por Cristiano.
Era una rivalidad linda, sobre todo porque estaba en el Madrid también y bueno, ahora está en un gran equipo también y lo vemos desde España.
No, es español.
No, English, I think, yeah.
I was curious because we shared this stage 15 years,
Yeah.
me and him. I don't know if it's ever happened in football. The same 2 guys in the same stage all the time.
Yeah.
So it's not easy,
No.
as you know. And of course, we have a good relationship. We not had a dinner together yet, but I
Really?
hope in the future.
You're in Monaco tonight.
It is nice. Of course, I miss to play in Spain. We have that battle the
Yeah.
last 15 years, which is good. He pushed me and I push him as
Yeah.
well. So it's good to be part of history of football. I'm there, and of course he's there as well.
You had a recent interview, didn't you? Taken a little bit out of context, saying that you're going to retire next year. I think it's very clear for you that you're not retiring just yet. You'll be around for a while. Can we just ask you to make sure you retire at the same time as Leo?
Well,
Que termine su carrera al mismo momento que tú.
he's 2 years younger than me, I
So keep
think.
going, no?
But I think I look good for my age. I'm still. I'm not bad. So I hope to be here next year, and in 2 years, in 3 years. So the people who don't like me, they're going to see me here.
The haters are all part of it, aren't they, Cristiano? I mean, we want to see this rivalry go on as long as possible. Thank you very much, both of you.
So from that video, like I'd like to highlight some great points. I mean, the rivalry has been going on for like 15 years. So basically, like this last decade and more, they've like really defined the sports field for especially like football. But also another point Ronaldo mentioned was about collaboration and leadership, which is a valuable aspect. I think sports has a great way of nurturing these skills. And to capture these 2 skills, I would like to use a concept I learned last year called through a fellowship called METIS, which is a fellowship for education leaders here in Kenya. And this concept is called collective leadership. And this basically means a group of people working together toward a shared goal. and I believe sports gives us an opportunity to learn how we can lead ourselves, how we can lead others. And it's in the smallest of ways, whether it's by coming up with a warm-up exercise for the team, leading the team practice, leading a prayer, cheering your teammates and your rivals as well. So there are unique ways and opportunities for one to practice this collective leadership by engaging in sports. And I also see this practice by the football team that I'm part of here in Nairobi. The team manager really delegates tasks and responsibilities to everyone so that we can get to practice our leadership skills.
Thanks, Richard. So far, you've tackled the angle of, you collaborating and relating with your teammates. Curious, is there a role that mentorship has played in your life? Are there things that you have learned from your coaches and people who you look up to?
Yeah. So let me just browse quickly through my notes. So yeah, being both an athlete, both in high school and college, I really appreciated my coaches in that they were just not focused on not focused on just the team's athletic performances, but also they really cared about our academics and also like just our general well-being. And definitely like all my coaches from high school to college served as mentors. They were people that I looked up to. And even right now with the work I do, I consider myself like a mentor to those students because I know like what impact that had in my life. And even just seeing how they carried themselves, how they showed like respect and kindness to everyone. That really played a big part for me. So I would also like to take this chance, an opportunity to thank my coaches. I'll name them if that's okay. So I really thank Coach Lockren, Coach Seth, Coach Matthew, Coach Lester, and Pete. They really stepped up and were there for the team. Like they gave it, they're all like 110%. So yeah, definitely like the mentorship like I received from my coaches have played a really big role in who I am today.
Thanks, Richard. Indeed, as you say, mentorship is very important, and that is one of the reasons why this webinar series is being organized, because getting to listen to experienced athletes like yourself is also a big form of mentorship. Yeah. And as again the COVID situation has provided us with very interesting opportunities through which we can engage and we can learn from each other, because I mean, like, this probably would have taken a lot to have you talk to us and talk to young people out here, but thankfully making use of technology and making the most of the times that are these unprecedented times. So thank you so much. And again, I want to encourage everybody to keep your comments coming. Just shoot any question, shoot any comment that you have and that you would like to ask Richard. He's here for another 30 minutes and he's going to definitely respond to them. And now going to another angle of the discussion. So far we have looked at the, what the journey has meant for you, where you started to where you are now, the skills that you have picked up from dedication to collaboration to commitment to leadership. And now, so let's now step out of the box. What are some of the insights or takeaways that you would like to share about sports?
That's great. So another great thing about sports that I've noticed, and I wish I noticed it more earlier, but I've seen a lot of athletes, they've been able to use their platform and star power to amplify the voices of people who have been marginalized and discriminated against. And I'd like to actually encourage everyone, you don't have to be an athlete or a famous person, to do more like self-reflection on the assumptions, biases, prejudice that we have with people who don't conform to what we're used to. And so like athletes have actually used their platform to speak to what's important to them. And this is where like social justice, activism come into play, like with sports. And with what's happening right now, like around the Black Lives Matter movement, I'd like to share that this movement has gone on for quite some time. And there have been like great not just athletes, but great poets, great authors, great filmmakers, and thinkers who have contributed to this movement. And athletes, both in the past and in the present, have also been part of this movement to push for more equal treatment, and in this case, Black Lives Matter, like more equal treatment of the Black community in the US. So I'd like to highlight a few athletes who've been able to capture and been able to use their platform to fight for the rights of oppressed people. And so for like the first photo I'd like to have on up is one that was the first one on my left is a photo that was taken during the Munich Olympics in 1972. And this was by two athletes who were doing a protest to highlight like the oppression that was happening to Black people. And this is 1972. Fast forward to the picture on the right, that's Colin Kaepernick. I think most people are aware of this one. And he was an American football athlete, and he also staged a protest where he was kneeling when the national anthem for the US was being played. And this was to highlight the police brutality that was happening. So you can see like how this movement has been for quite some long time, and it's so unfortunate, but it's inspiring, like seeing athletes like use their platform to step up and bring these issues to light, because it's still like a persistent problem that's happening in our society. So for the next photo, you can go on. We have our own athlete who is Tekla Lorupe. I think most Kenyans might know her. And she started a great foundation that she uses to advocate for women's rights, education, and peace. And also Tekla was, I think, the former marathon record breaker of the marathon until just recently. So also here at home in Kenya, we have athletes who use their platforms to highlight these issues. If you can go on to the next photo. This one is of Fazia Lilesa, who's an Olympic marathon runner from Ethiopia, who staged a daring protest against his government when he crossed the finish line with his arms crossed up in the air, which is a gesture made by the Oromo people from Ethiopia who have suffered brutal police crackdowns. And from this, you can tell like the oppression that's happening, especially with the police enforcement. And it's almost, so that's why I think like the Black Lives Matter movement like really resonated with us here as Kenyans as well, because we are also suffering from police brutality, especially like with the young people as well. If you go on to the next photo. So this photo is actually of my friend. Her name is Jordan Marie Daniel. She's also a long distance athlete, runner, and she started an organization called Rising Hearts and uses her running platform to raise awareness about the plight of indigenous people in the US, and more specifically the killings and disappearances of Native American women and girls. Move on to the next photo. I don't know if people can tell who that guy is, but that's King LeBron James, a basketball player from the US. And he started a school which he called I Promise School. And this was to help vulnerable children access a high quality education in his hometown in, I think it's called Akron, Ohio. Move on to the last photo. Yeah, and finally, like to make positive change, one doesn't really have to be super famous. I think you can make change within your sphere of influence and contribute towards a more just and equitable world. So I'd like to highlight like trailblazers like you, Wakesho, Khairan, and Amy, who've organized platforms such as this, with the organizations you guys have started to provide more inclusive opportunities for all athletes and sports enthusiasts, whether it's through hosting like legal clinics for athletes to know about their rights, whether it's learning about scouting and how they can access opportunities to continue with sports, sharing about scholarships, and hosting these webinars. So big kudos to all you three for stepping up to do this, especially during the pandemic and the lockdown. And actually, before I finish off on this part, I'd like to say I really appreciate the compassionate efforts that and sacrifice that many athletes and individuals have made to contribute and continue to urge everyone to know that. So sorry, let me repeat that. It's really great to see athletes stepping up to do this type of work, and also individuals stepping up. But I would like to also bring it back to we have government and elected leaders whose sole responsibility is actually to take care of us, to make sure everyone has a safe environment, everyone feels safe, their rights are respected, they have dignity. And it's unfortunate, some of our elected leaders are not doing that. Even just during this pandemic, most of them are missing. They're still politicking, and people are really suffering. So right now, we're becoming more aware of police brutality and the oppression and racism of Black people. But I also hope that this moment can serve as a reflection point for everyone to be more empathetic towards the sidelining, policing, and violation of the rights of children, women, our LGBTQ community, refugees, people with special needs, and many more voices that are forcibly silenced and marginalized. And the last point I'd like to make on this part is, so if you haven't, I can't stress this enough, but start getting involved in civic political education and policy. And yes, I understand this is messy, this is boring stuff, but this is one area and facet us as young people have power to tap into. So I would encourage people to read about freedom movements and freedom fighters, both in the past and current, to learn from them and see how we can organize and recreate, transform our society and our governments to truly take care of everyone.
Thanks, Richard. You've really talked about a lot of heavy stuff, from the impact and the social change that can be as a result of sport. You've also touched on, what we can do and the governance aspects of this conversation. And I actually want us to delve deeper into those issues. But before we go there, I'm looking at some of the people who are joining us on this live, and one of the questions that is coming up is in terms of the mapping to for where they can, how they can get to where you are, in a sense that how easy was it for you to to get resources and get the equipment that that were availed to you for you to become a better sports person? So yes, basically from your experience, was it easy for you to get resources, things like equipment and all that? And what you would advise a young person watching us today in terms of access to resources, access to equipment, what would you tell them? Do they create that, go out there, form their own team and just get on doing it, the hope that someone would support them? Yeah, please.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So a bit of my life story. I think for the people who joined in, I was able to study both here in Kenya up until Form 2, and then my family moved to the US. And here in Kenya, my primary school, it had resources. It just didn't prioritize sports as much. So we had a sports field, and we didn't have a swimming pool, but we were able to go to a swimming pool. So it had the ability to nurture our sports talents, but academics took priority. So in terms of a young person at this point, the journey is never easy. I won't lie about that. Even though my primary school had the resources, academics was still the main aspect people focused on, and my parents were focused on. But at an early age, I saw sports as as I said, as a fun and a safe space. I hadn't dreamt of making it as a professional at that point yet. Up until when I got into high school, and I was okay, I can see I can compete at a much higher level at this point. And then in high school, I went to a boarding school that didn't have the resources. So that was also a challenge. But as I mentioned, I saw my classmates and my peers stepping up to really make sporting like a worthwhile thing for us to do in high school, even though we didn't have the resources. The only resource we had was a school field and a goalpost. So we made do with what we had. And actually at that point, academics was getting even harder. So I just used to play sports for fun until like in Form 2, like when my life our family's life shifted, and this was due to my mom gaining a scholarship to study in the US, and she didn't want to leave me and my brother alone, so she was able to fundraise, which was not even easy to do. Like we were shifting from a new education system, a new country, and going to the US. US is not cheap, but their public systems are working. So I attended a public school which had all the resources for learning and also for like any other extracurricular activities, be it art, be it music. So what I can say, like as a young person, and this is also like tied into like the political nature and government and what we have to do to create the safe spaces, to create the opportunities, to create the resources. And at this point, like I can't say like I fully understand it, because my path it wasn't straightforward, and I don't think for anyone is, but I think this is one of the areas like we can start advocating for, like create policies that make sure like our schools, our public schools, our recreational spaces are like safe and well equipped to enable like all talents to flourish. It's still like a big missing part that I see here in Kenya. But compared to the US, they definitely had the resources. Like even when I went to the university, there was a whole department just dedicated to athletics, and we had a sporting director, and they had coaches for all different sports, and also our coaches, they also taught school. They also taught classes as well. So it's more about, the question I think can shift to more about like as a country, knowing that we're producing like really, really great world-class athletes, but seeing like a missing link between education, sports, and also nurturing that talent from a young age. I think that's how the conversation should maybe take shape, and seeing like how we can problem solve around that, and get like leaders who can advocate for like those rights, advocate for those opportunities and resources to be in our schools and to be accessible to all. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, so I'm gonna sip water.
It's okay. Go ahead. You've been speaking for the last 38 minutes, so we understand. So again, so thank you for a snippet of your journey, and at least it's opening our eyes to see that it can be done. As you said, it's not straightforward, but it still can be done. And so just tying it to what you've just said, is there a portal of information, or a place where people can go to get resources? Are there some websites that I remember there's a time back when I think it was around 2013 actually, when I had encountered a young man who was a really good athlete, and he mentioned that he had met some talent scouts in Eldoret, and these guys asked him to pay some money to help him relocate so that he could become an athlete in a different country. But unfortunately, that ended up being a terrible scam. So again, for those who are listening and they have dreams to take their talent to the next level, to join a club, to run for our country or a different country, are there points of resources or information that you can point them out to, and things to look out for? Say if someone approaches you, like the young man in Eldred, and tells you that I am a talent scout from Bahrain, are there things that they can look out for to know whether this is true or not true?
That's a really good question. I'll be honest, in terms of like scouting, I'm not so familiar with the process, but I know there was a webinar that really touched on that. I forgot his name, the guy who led the masterclass on scouting, but I think he's like a great resource because that's what he's studying and that's what he does. I can speak more to the scouting for student athletes, and maybe like a definition of a student athlete like is yeah, you focus on your academics, and the athletic part or the sports part is the secondary thing that you're doing. So study comes first and then athletics. But speaking on the US experience, if you go to any university website for the US, and the major universities in the US. There's a lot of universities in the US, but the major ones. If you go on there and you go on to like the admissions page, like just on their website, the admissions page, you can email them or even tweet them, and just ask like, hey, I'm interested in attending the school and I'm also an athlete. Are there opportunities for getting like a scholarship to attend the school? And I think, but I know most universities are really responsive in that. So that's one way that you can do directly. As far as organizations, like honestly, Sports Legal, Future Practice, and African Sports Network, I think those are like legit organizations that also people can reach out to as well. And it's really unfortunate that there are people or agents, and I've heard stories as well that agents that try and take advantage of like our athletes, and I think like I don't know, I don't have the answer for that, but I can just mention that if you're interested in going to university, like just type university, check out their contact information, because what you get on the website, and for American universities, I think they have .edu, so make sure you're not being diverted into another website. So it's more about like knowing what you are looking for, knowing what you also want to study in university, because you should know that you're going there to also get an education, and also not running, but sports can be a great complement to your education. And in also maybe another thing to look at in US universities, they are classified into, I think, 3 divisions. There's Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. Division 1 schools, they give full ride scholarships to their athletes, and also I think partial scholarships. Division 2 also give sports scholarship, and then Division 3, they rarely, I mean, I haven't heard of Division 3 schools giving scholarship for athletes, and I attended Division 3 university, so I didn't get a scholarship to run for the school, but I did get an assistance through an international grant that I applied for. So there are not very many, but there are options that you can look into. You just have to like research. And maybe I can say this, like, if you're interested in this, like, reach out to me, like we can work on this together and problem solve together, as I don't have a definite answer now, but I can say just going directly to like the source and the university that you want to go to. The internet is so open these days. There's so much information, which is also sometimes a bad thing, but like knowing what you're searching for, getting feedback from other people will also maybe help you in getting like what you want and not being led astray by like scammers.
Thank you so much, Richie. First and foremost, like, I'm really grateful that you have offered all of us listening the opportunity to reach out to you, to have that conversation and to problem solve together. So, we know that you're very busy, and we are grateful that, that you're willing to be open to assist us in that way. So thank you so much. Also, just to add to the point that you have mentioned, the webinar that Richie referred to is on the YouTube page. So please just go check it out, African Sports Network YouTube page. So Nathan Jean Kariuki, he expounded on the scouting issue that Richie has talked about. And so third, again, as you have been told, the internet, Google, there's a lot of information out there that can be of help. And that, yes, you can, check out websites of universities. And as Richard has said, you'd be surprised at what you get. And so you just talked about education. We have, covered a lot in terms of sports and skills. So let's just also touch on the issue of education. For you, you said like masomo ilikuwa kazi ngumu. So, just help us shed some light into sports and education. Are there, what your challenge or experience around that, and can you rely on one to the exclusion of the other? Yeah, so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So with education, and this goes back to like the opening statement I said, like, so how can we like reimagine our education and schooling system to become more holistic, so that we're not just focused on passing tests or grades, but the main focus of like education is learning, and learning is just not limited to getting that A. Passing tests is great. It's not like I'm saying, don't focus on your studies. Yeah, please read, please do the homework, do your assignments. But I think us as like education leaders and and also like I challenge like the government to really think as sports as part of an integral aspect of learning. And the question I can bring back to everyone is like, so how can we create that environment that supports learning, that can enable us to coexist with each other and also our environment? So at this point, I actually like to bring the question to everyone to reflect and seeing like if you're an athlete or you played sports back in school, how would you want like your school to have supported you or to support you with, I guess, like just with both your academics and both the sports that you're taking part of? Yeah. So this is almost a bit like of a reflection exercise. We can do it for maybe a minute and a half, but we can see like how the engagement is. So the question is like, how would you like educators or schools to support you as an athlete? Yeah. And we can do this like by sharing like the messages on the chat. So I'll start going to the chat box to see like the live comments if anyone is like contributing to something. So yeah, like you can type on the chat box like as where you're at right now, even if you don't compete or play any sports, like how would you want to be supported if you wanted to excel both in sports and also in academics? So yeah.
So yes, guys, just keep your comments coming. I'm also really curious to see how you'd love to be supported on this one. So as we give you time to type and locate where your keypad is, probably there were two questions that had come up. Let me try and scroll up so that Richard can answer both as you guys share your comments and questions. So yes, the questions. Aha, great. So Cyprian Kimutai asks, if you were the cabinet secretary for sports, what would you do differently as opposed to what's being done at the moment? Tough one, tough one. Let me say that again. If you were, Richard, the cabinet secretary for sports, what would you do differently as opposed to what's being done at the moment? We have seen all the drama and all the unfortunate things that have been happening in that department and how things have been handled, from athletes being stranded in different countries to, resources being diverted to things that they were not meant for. So what would you do differently?
Really great question, Cyprian, and thank you for asking that. It's actually almost tied to like the question I asked. And that's one of the first things maybe I'll do as the cabinet secretary for sports is like ask like athletes, what do you want this office to really do to support you? Okay. I think most of the times when people get into these positions of power, they get disconnected from the people and disconnected from the voice, from the issues. And it's so unfortunate, like, that it takes social media posting to go viral so that a government steps in to help the athletes who've gone to do amazing, amazing things to represent the country. but after they finished or after they compete, they're left stranded in a hotel because of unpaid bills. Yeah, like it's all messed up. So maybe one of the things is like, yeah, really get like sports leaders, get and get like actual sport athletes as well, because I think also the federations have become so politicized. So it's almost like a revamp of a whole system, and honestly, like it's hard to think of a specific place to start. But I think our government leaders, or if I was CS of CS of sports, is really like getting to the hearts of listening to people. Like even host a webinar such as this, where you can invite actual athletes, both young athletes, professional ones, and even retired athletes or former athletes, because what I've seen in this country is like after an athlete has like committed their time and dedication towards the sports, towards representing the country, at the end of the day, they are left stranded by themselves. So another thing maybe I'll think of is setting up a welfare for athletes, a welfare association. I don't know if there's one that exists. If there's one that does exist, I think there should be like some serious work in restructuring how they represent athletes. But yeah, start a welfare association to take care of athletes when they are competing and even after. And then the other thing I think that's really, really lacking in this country is transparency, especially when money is involved and funds. So really knowing like what's the budget allocation for sports, and what does each sports what's the contribution, what's the allocation for each sports, whether it's like hockey, whether it's tennis, whether it's track and field, and that to be transparent. And like we have social media, like we should be going on the Ministry of Sports website and saying and knowing that, oh, okay, hockey was dedicated this amount of money and this is what it will be used for. So those are maybe just a few, but I know like our issues are more than that, and that's why I think it's more like about our values and the people like we elect in our leadership to represent us. So we really need to get more value-driven leaders into these spaces of power that can really help us.
You should be our cabinet secretary already. Those are amazing. Those are amazing suggestions, and you're right, it boils down to all the values that we have as a society. And I'd actually like to pick up on what you have said about budgeting and call upon us to also be proactive in asking these questions and seeking these answers. How many times, I'd also love to challenge us and to ask us, how many times do we interrogate the auditor reports from the various counties, like why, like this is probably a challenge to all of us. Check out your county and see the amount of money that they have allocated towards sports, and just, pick up conversations, at least nowadays with technology and everything, it's at least easy and information being out there, it's easy for us to start engaging in those discussions and in those conversations. Yeah. So thank you for that question, Kimutai. That was excellent. And thank you, Richard, for answering it. As I said, I cannot wait for you to take that office someday now that you retired from active sporting. So there's a second question that yes, I got it. So here it is. If you were to go back and change anything from your journey as a student athlete, what would you do differently or not do based on your experience now and the knowledge that you have gained after that? What would you think? What regrets? What would you do different?
You asking really good questions that I think need a day for me to reflect and note down. So just give me a few seconds as I recollect.
Good. So as you're recollecting, probably I could send a few shout outs to, there's so many people who have joined. I see Mbaluka Wavinya. Thank you so much for joining us. I see Evans Njoro. Thank you very much for joining us, guys. I'm trying to pull up your names, but yes, there's also Michelle Otinda. Thank you so much, Michelle. Evans, Felista, Walumbe, Kevin. I see Itu. I don't even think I can pronounce that correctly, but Itu. Thank you so much for joining us. So over to you. How, to you, Richard?
Nice. Okay. Really great question. So the question was, if I was to go back and change anything from my journey as a student athlete, what would I do differently or not do based on my knowledge, experience, and outlook? Um, so one thing, this is like in relation to like sports, but also like just general well-being. And one thing I would change, especially like in college, was like my diet. Um, so as an athlete, like I used to run a lot, burn a lot of calories, and this kind of gave me the freedom to eat anything, or so I thought. So when it come to like eating, like I wasn't eating the most most healthy food, and even though my coaches were always trying to encourage us to like really make sure like our nutrition and diet is good. Yeah, like I was like, well, I'm burning all the calories, so I shouldn't think so much about it. So one thing I would definitely change is my diet, eat more vegetables. Because actually now at this point I'm seeing like how my metabolism has slowed down, and if if I mess up with my eating, like it really affects the whole of me, like both my mental, emotional, and also like I gain weight. So one thing I would change is promote more healthy eating, and this is for like everyone, but also athletes. Like if you change your diet, it will really improve your performance. So make sure like you can get a really good balanced meal, get all your vitamins, because this will really change your game, and you won't notice it immediately, but it's something progressive. The other thing I would like to change, yeah, in college, like I had a lot of injuries that affected me, especially in the first 2 years. And yeah, and this relation to like the diet that I wasn't following really well, but also um, I realized like I wasn't listening to my body as much. So injuries will probably start in a small way, and then like I ignore it. It takes me a while before I go to like the what do they call it place? The I think it was like the fitness center. Yeah, the fitness center to get checked. So really taking time to like understand my body, knowing like if this pain starts, like let's get it checked out immediately. So like seeking help will be seeking help as soon as possible and not waiting to the last minute when it's a really bad injury. Would be one thing I change. And the last part is using my running platform to like be an activist, and that's I know I had like a whole 10-minute session on that, but really using my platform to speak out to issues like I really care about and highlighting issues of people who like are oppressed and marginalized. So those would be the three things like I would like to change if I would go back.
Awesome. At least, there are just three, so you must have done a lot of things right. So yes, we are actually just almost at the tail end of our discussion today. But oh yeah, let's not leave. There's another question here. So what happens in the event a student athlete midway into his or her education gets a career-ending injury? Are there any repercussions?
Oh, that's a good question. So as I mentioned before, like my 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 student athletic career wasn't solely dependent on athletics. So um, if and I did get some like really bad injuries that put me out for like a month. And when you're running track, like being out for a month is really crucial, especially during the season. But I do, but the great thing, like I saw in my university, like they offered like insurance to cover you, so making sure like you get like top quality like healthcare and medical care provided for you. So oh yeah, it's a hard question to answer, but in the other higher division schools, like they definitely get like all the best equipment and resources, and um career ending injuries, I haven't seen them that much, but I do know that they do happen. But one thing I could say as an athlete, like have a fallback plan or a backup plan. For me, the fallback plan, or not fallback plan, but my education was taking more precedent, especially when I started going in university. It was the main goal of why I was in university. But as an athlete, like if athletics is your main thing, try and have a backup as well, and it can be related to sports. So if maybe you're playing football, like are there any other careers that you can see yourself doing other than competing as a professional athlete or an amateur athlete? Can you be a coach? Can you be an assistant coach? Can you be like the fitness person for the team? So it is unfortunate, but it's the reality of life. Like injuries can happen by mistake, by accident, but have like a fallback plan so that sports is not, or athletics or sports is not the sole thing that you're dependent on to live. Yeah, because life is, I think life is complex and dynamic, and there's so many things you can do. And sports is one of it, even though like it's the talent maybe you've been working 18 years towards. Just think of a fallback plan to have in place in case something like that happens.
Thanks, Richard. Probably one of two last questions before we now wind up. Curiously, your title. You're the lead of Innovate Kenya, and I've been thinking around the term innovate and innovation, and I'm sure we can all remember Julius Siego. He was nicknamed Mr. YouTube, the Kenyan who learned how to play javelin on YouTube. Yeah. So from where you stand, how can technology, like what is the impact of technology on sports, and how can young people harness technology to improve themselves, and how can they use technology to innovate around sports?
Nice. Okay, great. So yeah, so I'm the program lead for Innovate Kenya, which is a program under youth organization called Global Minimum. And this organization, what the work we do is that we support young innovators, leaders, and change makers in Africa, specifically Sierra Leone and Kenya. So we provide a platform where they can learn how they can be leaders and change makers in our communities that solve problems. And for us, with the word innovate, we actually juxtapose it with problem solving. So I know innovation, when people hear the word, they think about like things to do with tech. But we believe innovation can happen across all the fields, be it both tech, but also the arts, even the sports, as you mentioned, like you can innovate around sports. So onto like how technology you can take advantage of technology for in sports. Definitely, like that's a great example of. I forgot about Julius' example. So yeah, there's videos these days like coaches upload that you can go watch to see practice sessions. I know the community football league I play in. We've been actually sharing videos on our WhatsApp group on like drills that we can do. So that's one way. The other way, like, and that I see that's the top teams. That the top teams, especially like Barcelona, I'm a big Barcelona fan, and also I think Liverpool, they are now using like data science to influence like their strategy and tactics in a game. So like, and like, I know like the shoes they wear these days have like special chips, which collect a lot of information, like the distance, kilometers covered. I think even how many passes like a player does, and they get to use this sort of information to analyze like how they can improve their game. So that's more like on the professional league. But for us, like with the phones is like a really, really powerful tool. And they're like fitness tracking apps, running apps that you can use to also improve yourself. And I think one good thing when you exercise or when you're participating in sports is like, how can you track your improvement? Because seeing like the progress that you make can really help you push yourself even more. So I encourage you, like, download those fitness apps to make sure like it can help you like with your diet. They can tell you like the amount of vitamins you need or the amount of calories you need before like a big game or a big race. And so like those are some of the small ways that I see like technology can really assist and help in like enhancing sports performance.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Richard. That is, that's really great what you guys are also doing with the football team. It's interesting that you can now have drills posted for people to learn online. So let's take another question. There was a question that has come up from Adam Clevenger. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. But yes, Adam, what was one of your hardest setbacks while being a student athlete, and how did you overcome it?
Adam Clevenger. So he's he's one like of my best friends. He's my teammate from high school. Thank you for joining, Adam. Great question. What was one of my biggest setback? Ah, I think it was it's related to like injuries. I think Cyprian also answered that question on injuries. Like those things like really set me personally back, but also with the team. Like I realized like I was more faster in relay races than I was in my individual races, and that's because like I had this perception like I don't want to let my team down. And when there was a race that I think Adam was in that race. It was a relay race, and it was a 4x4, 4x400 meters race, and that was the I think second or third leg, and I got the baton and ran the first like 250 meters, and then towards like the last leg, like almost the last stretch, I just felt like my hamstring pulled, and I'd passed like two people, and I was like now in the first place to hand the baton, but like that sensation when I heard it, like I felt like my whole world just shattered, and like three people passed me. So that was one of the big setbacks that I remember. But I think in that relay race, we still came out on top. So one of the other things is like the team like really helped me. That team and the bond and the friendship that we had also really helped me throughout my toughest time as an athlete. And even when injuries like hit me, you still, personally, like it's hard for you, but also like knowing like your team can step up and just believing and trusting that your team is there for you, and that they understand like injuries happen, but they can also like step up. And I think that race was it was one of the hardest for me, but we still, I think, won or placed like second. So yeah, thank you, Adam, for that session, and thank you for joining in.
Yes, that's a great question, Adam. Thank you for asking it and for your engagement. So again, thank you to everybody who's managed to engage, who has managed to ask questions. So here's a comment. Adam says, I think coaches and teammates can both provide support. Teammates are likely to see each other more often outside of sport, providing an environment where they're checking in on each other and providing help when needed, maybe studying sessions also, or just checking on each other in general. Friendship in and out of sport. Thank you so much, Adam. That is indeed a great comment. And finally, Richard, what does the future of sports look like? With COVID, things are set to change in tremendous ways. So, how do you see that impacting sports? Would it take a lot of time before we see people filling up stadiums? How does that future look like with COVID?
What does the future look like? During this time, it's really weird watching football games, and I think one of the games that I watched, they were blasting like speakers to imitate like there's a crowd. But yeah, it's just so weird, and I'm still processing it. Like watching football or sports in that way, like with no fans, and it's weird, but I think like we will overcome this point in our time that we're living in right now. And for sports, I think one of the features I was seeing, like, I think it's related to the question about like technology. I see more technology being involved in it. But I would like to maybe bring it back to like here in Kenya, like what we would like to see sports and how like it should evolve. So I want to see like more athletes being being cared for, especially like in terms of like their rights, like knowing their rights, knowing if they're entering a contract, like it's a fair contract where they're not being abused or taken advantage of. Because I've heard stories, so I don't have like the research to back it up, but I've heard stories about people being athletes being taken advantage of. So yeah, like just more like care and fairness that goes into like taking care of our athletes. I would like also to see more older people or adults taking part in sports and play. And this is the symbolism of this is also like really important for like our younger generation, to let them know like even when I get older, like I can still participate in sports, I can still have fun. So that's another thing like I would like to see. And then what else? What I really liked about my university is like they had co-ed games, so games like where both males and females like play a sport together, and I rarely see that happen here. So like football teams that are made up of both boys and girls or men and women, I think I would like to see more of that, because I think like one of the issues I see, like it's in high school, the high school I went to was just all boys. But in primary, like we attended, like I attended a mixed boys and girls school, and then in high school, like yeah, we were all boys, and yeah, I can understand the reasons why they separate us, especially like in boarding school. But I think there's an important socialization aspect that is missing, and that we as guys like we forget like to socialize with women. So like participating in sports can break down like those socialization barriers, and I'd like to see more of that, more competitive sports or more professional sports that incorporate both male and female in playing the sport. Yeah, with in regards to COVID, yeah, yeah, big up to all the scientists and epidemiologists who are trying to understand this disease. I think for now, like they really need our support, and we hope like this period can end. So that we can continue like with sports and continue um, enhancing like the sports field, especially in our country as well, and globally.
Thanks, Richard. You like this has just been an amazing conversation. And just before we close, what opportunities exist again? Because I know some people have joined in, and they're also really curious to know. Because I mean, I'm sure you've been seeing the statistics. Our unemployment rates are unfortunately, very high, and people are beginning to think outside the box. Yeah, so people who have the talent. You mentioned earlier, things like fitness coaches and all that. So just as a way of wrapping up, what other opportunities or what opportunities exist in sport, and like what can you call out to encourage people to take part in?
Yeah, definitely there's a lot of opportunity. I just feel as a country we haven't really invested in sports and also the creative industry, which I think have enormous potential. And yeah, it's unfortunate at this time, like artists or even sports people just have to find their own path. But I think if we can all become like a collective movement through like organizations such as you guys, the ones you've started, to really get the numbers, like power will concede to greater power, and we have power in numbers. So like if we can really organize and form like a collective movement to make sure like our issues are heard, making sure like the sports industry and creative industry is getting the attention and the resources and investment that it's needed. That's one step. The other part, I think, and this is already happening a lot. Like I see former athletes going back to get back to their communities, whether it's starting a school, whether it's starting like a running camp. And I think there's also one thing actually I've been thinking about. I'm like, why are we not hosting like world marathons, like global marathons, knowing that we're producing like the best athletes in running? So that confuses me. Like we only have this one marathon called Standard Chartered, but I think we can do more. And to open up other counties like Iten, and the counties like where we see like most of our dominant athletes coming up. Like I would like to see a marathon happening in those counties to open up the economies there, to open up the opportunities, because I think there's huge potential in investing in that, but we have to have like the right kind of leaders and mindsets to get that to happen, because it's not even simple organizing for a world-class marathon. As far as opportunities, I think the opportunity, more like in organizing, sharing opportunities. As a student athlete, I got to learn more from my coaches and also my teammates. And I encourage, even with your team that you're playing with, whether it's football or hockey, tennis, just started talking about like the bigger picture and trying to see like what's the future of our sports. And what are the challenges that are faced, like the people who have gone ahead of us. Let's learn from them. Let's see like what we can start doing collectively. And I think the question is more appropriate for like Sports Legal, African Sports Network, and Future Practice to see like what we can do to elevate like our sports and creative industry as well, because there's huge potential and there's so much talent that's left out. Because like there's no investment or the seriousness that it takes to really elevate these industries.
Thank you, Richard. Indeed, this has been a very, very eye-opening discussion, and I want to thank you for taking the time to spare to share with us your insights and insights, experience, opportunities, and challenges that you have talked about. And also, again, by way of winding up, I want to thank the African Sports Network, Legal and Future Practice for putting this up together. And so again, just to wind up, Richard, you can now give us your parting shot, a message to fellow athletes, any message you might have to people in governance, to our policymakers, and to young people who have taken the time to come on board and listen to this conversation on sports education and skills. And once more, thank you so much to everybody who has taken their time to tune in. Thank you so much for questions and for sending in your comments. So Richard, over to you for your parting shot.
My parting shot is it's just like related to like as young people, we need more structure around like how we organize. I'm just repeating the same thing I've said around like how we organize, because I'm saying like the government and our political leaders will listen to us like when we approach them as a collective movement. So how do we highlight the issues that are facing us with government so that they can like really step up to really help us? And I'm saying this because I know and I've seen that there's so much talent that is left out, and many young people don't get to live up to their full potential, and especially like when it comes to like both academics and sports, like you have to make a sacrifice to choose either one or the other. And most of the times like we get pressure to just go with academics, and I don't think that's the case. I think there's a way like we can set up like a safe space and a safe environment in education and schooling to support both academics and sports. And this happened to me, even though like my journey was a bit not straightforward, but I believe like it can happen like with the determination and will, and also like with the talent that I see in many young people and the athletes that we have. So yeah, let's organize and form a movement to like really bring our issues to light.
Once again, thank you so much, Richard, for taking the time to share your experience with us. We are extremely grateful. Thank you to the African Sports Network, to Sports Legal and Future Practice for organizing this amazing session. And again, thank you for everybody who has taken their time to join this webinar. I am sure you have learned a lot. And thank you for sending in your questions. Thank you for sending in your comments. And we're looking forward to meet again next time. So keep in touch. Keep locked on our social pages, and you will see notifications for the next events and webinars such as this. Again, please go to the African Sports Network. There was a resource that was shared earlier, so you can have everything past YouTube event, past webinars, past discussions. They're all on the YouTube page. Once again, thank you so much, and see you next time. Bye-bye.